In the shadow of the Colosseum morning, in Rome didn't begin with the chatter of the markets, but with an impatient roar echoing from the amphitheaters. Today was a great day. On the sand of the arena, the fate of those who were both despised and secretly worshipped would be decided. Gladiator games were not just mindless slaughter. They were the most expensive, complex, and philosophical theater in human history. Picture a fighter in the tunnels beneath the stadium. His skin is rubbed with olive oil, his armor is heavy, and the weapon in his hand has become an extension of his body over months of training. Above him, he hears the roar of 50,000 throats. That isn't just the sound of a crowd, it's the sound of the judge who will decide if he sees tomorrow. The barley eater industry. There is a common myth that gladiators were just starving slaves driven to the slaughter. This couldn't be further from the truth. A gladiator was a high-value asset. Rome had specialized schools called ludi. The most famous, the Ludus Magnus, stood right next to the Colosseum and was connected to it by a secret underground tunnel. The owner of the school, the Lanista, invested a fortune in these men. They were treated by the best doctors. In fact, the level of medical care in these schools was centuries ahead of its time. Surprisingly, gladiators followed a specific diet. They were called hordearii, or barley eaters. Bone analysis shows they ate a carb-heavy vegetarian diet to build a thick layer of subcutaneous fat. Why? So that in battle, an opponent's blade would get stuck in the fat without damaging vital organs. It allowed the fighter to bleed flashily for the crowd's delight while remaining in the fight. Chess on the sand battles in the arena were strictly regulated. It was like a lethal game of rock, paper, scissors. Romans loved a balance of tactics. On one side, you might have the Murmillo, the tank of the empire. He wore a massive helmet with a fish-shaped crest and carried a heavy scutum shield. His opponent was often the retiarius, the most unusual gladiator of all. He had no helmet and no shield, only a net and a trident. The crowd often mocked him for his unmanly style because he had to constantly run and dodge. But if that net landed on the heavy Murmillo, the fight was over in seconds. It was a battle of raw power against pure agility. The Festival of Death. A typical day at the arena was scheduled by the hour. The morning began with the Venatio, the wild beast hunts. Thanks to Roman roads and logistics, lions from Africa, tigers from Asia, and bears from Europe were delivered straight to Rome. At noon, the darkest hour arrived, the execution of criminals. But all of this was just the warm-up for the main course. As the sun began to set, the stars emerged. Every sword strike and every shield bash was met with an explosion of emotion from the stands. Gladiators were the rock stars of their age. Their names were graffitied on city walls, their sweat was sold as an aphrodisiac, and noble women were known to risk everything for a single night with a champion. The final gesture. The biggest myth of the arena is the thumbs down. Historians still debate what the death sentence actually looked like. Most likely, if the crowd wanted blood, they pointed their thumb outward, signifying a drawn sword, or up toward their throat. A closed fist, conversely, meant sword in the sheath, mercy. If a fighter showed exceptional bravery, he could be awarded the rudis, a wooden sword. This was his get-out-of-jail-free card. The gladiator became a free man. The paradox, however, is that many of them never left. They stayed as trainers or even returned to the arena because nowhere else could they feel as alive as they did, one step away from death. The legacy of the sand. Gladiatorial games lasted for nearly 700 years. They vanished not just because of the rise of Christianity, but because the empire itself began to crumble. Maintaining such spectacles became too expensive for a failing economy. But looking at our modern stadiums and combat sports, we realize human nature hasn't changed much. We still crave heroes and the triumph of the human spirit over the fear of death. The gladiators built their glory on blood, while the engineers built the arenas from concrete that has outlasted millennia. If you're interested in the fates of those who forged history with sword and blood, like and subscribe to the channel. There are still many great battles and forgotten heroes ahead. See you on the next page of history.